Are you ready to make your world come alive? I hope so, because that's what we're doing today.
This week's sponsor is Dragon Shield, and they're launching some new products towards the end of August. What are they launching? Well, the Game Master Companion accessory screen and box. That's this thing here. I'm going to show you what's inside in a few moments, as well as the Player Companion box and screen. Going to look at that in a couple months' time. But what is in this box? Well, firstly, it's really nicely made, very robust, very solid, very pretty kind of artwork. And if I open it up very quickly, you'll see that we've got some really cool stuff in here. This opens out, boom, 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 as a screen and as a box. Now, the box is detachable, and the box can hold minis, it can hold your dice, it can hold whatever it is that you care to put into there. The screen itself has got these nice little pockets, so you can add in whatever data it is that you want to add in. You literally just slide it in and slide it out, and so there's really another no hassle there, and it stands up beautifully. It's this lovely hard composite material, kind of feels like pleather. Really, really cool, and you can kind of shape it however you like. And that on itself is just brilliant. But they've also given us a deck of invisible monsters. You see, all the monsters are absolutely invisible. Now, this is actually a deck of cards that you can write on with dry erase markers. I've done that. I've written some NPCs. So I'm going to slide them in here. This is something that I really like as well. I've got my PCs with their basic information on the one side, and on the other side, I've got more information for myself, little notes that I've kind of jotted down. So I'm going to pop them there, and you can use any one of the edges, by the way. I wrote down the little village that the PCs are currently staying in, and on the other side, I wrote down the weather, so I can remember that. Druids like that. That's always a nice little thing. And then I've got some NPCs that I've added in. Again, my information on the back, the information for the players on the front, so they can see what's going on. And then I can arrange them as I need to in terms of initiative. Oh, all right, well, this NPC is going before him, but after him. I mean, they really have just paid attention to everything that you could possibly want in a GM screen that you can control and manipulate. And when you're done, you just go bump, 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 bump. Thank you for playing. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. All right, goodbye. Thank you. Close that away. And lay this flat, and put all of this back, and bump, 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 done. What an amazing product. dragonshield.com/roleplaying. End of August is when you can pick these up. Next month, we'll be looking at the Player Companion, which comes in 2 different colors. Ooh, shiny. Anyway, until then, thank you to Dragon Shield for sponsoring us. And now, on with today's video.
Hello, my fellow DMs, GMs, gamers, game masters, storytellers, narrators, whatever you want to call yourself. You create TTRPG worlds in which your players can explore. And today we're going to actually be putting into practice everything that we have spoken about in the last 8 chapters that we have gone through. Now, to do that, there is a workbook that you can download for free from our website, www.greatgamemaster.com. Head to the download section, and in the bag of holding, you will see there it says Practical Guide Workbook. Download that. It is a form-fillable PDF. Now, we are going to put into practice everything that we have gone through on this channel, and I'm not going to be filling in the form over the next hour. That's not going to happen. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pausing this video. You're going to have to do that, I'm afraid. There's just no way to do it from our side as you kind of do this. Now, if you are going to actually follow through with this process, by the end of it, you're going to have a complete campaign ready to run and go. So it's up to you how much effort you want to put into it. If you want to just follow along, I've tried to make this video as speedy as possible whilst I'm filling in this documentation. Now, I am going to state very simply that I have already got an idea for a campaign that's based in a prison. And I kind of got this idea whilst I was wandering around UK Games Expo. Amazing exhibition if you can get to it. It's in the UK in June usually. I was wandering around, I was like, what if the entire campaign was set in a prison? So that has become one of my goals. So that's where I'm starting from. So I already have an idea in my head. I'm going to see about how to make this come to life with this document. Now, let me talk about this document very quickly. All right, so this is the practical guide to becoming a great GM. This PDF should be available from our website soon, if it isn't already by the time of this video. You can grab the PDF. The hard copy book will be available later on in the year, somewhere between September and October for actual shipping out. That's what this entire YouTube channel series for the past month, several months or so, has been based on this particular book. Now, this is the workbook, and you'll see that it's broken up into these different aspects. So the very first aspect, this is about making sure you yourself are in control of yourself. You've created a space that is going to work for you and enable you to be able to have fun and to engage and enjoy your game. So this is what we're going to start going through. We're going to start answering. Now, I know the workbook does reference pages from the practical guide. You don't yet have the practical guide, but you have all the videos that hopefully you have been watching and working through anyway. So let's start going through it. Things to know before you begin. What are you most concerned about? List the things that you are most concerned about, and we will see if we can break those down. And you're going to do that right now. So hit that pause button. There. Hit it. Hit it. Over there. It's over there. The pause button, I think. Hit the pause button now. Hopefully you filled that in. I've got two things there that are my big concerns. I've been doing this for a long time. You might have more concerns. You don't have to. You might not have any concerns, which would be concerning in itself. If you are confident that you have nothing to worry about, well, then that's great. I am worried that there's going to be a boring location, that if the whole thing is set inside a prison, it's just going to be dull, or it's going to be too constraining. The players are going to get bored and go, nah. I don't want that to happen. So that is something that I need to try and avoid. I need to try and get out of. And how am I going to do that yet? I don't know, because I don't know more about this campaign idea that I'm thinking of. So those are my two concerns: being boring and having a too constraining location, which by its nature should be confining and constraining anyway. Chapter 2, why do we play? Well, you should know why you play, but sometimes it's worth writing it down, and you're going to do that now. All right, so the things I've listed as why do we play? Well, I love exploring a great situation and finding unexpected outcomes. That's very true. I don't like to predefine how these games are going to end or anything along those lines. And, well, does that still hold true to my idea of building a one location, a campaign? It's going to be interesting. I don't know what the outcome is yet. I haven't even formulated that, and I don't want to formulate that. I like my players creating their own backstories, or their own stories, not even the backstories, their own stories. What stories can come out of this? I think there's a lot. I have to explore, but I think there's a lot that can come out of this. Stuff that grates me: poor player interaction. Well, if the players are not getting invested, that's a problem. But I know that investing requires work from my side as well. So I'm going to have to look at the NPCs and the reasons why the PCs would want to invest in this space anyway. So I'm going to have to look into that. And I also don't like one-dimensional characters, both on the PC side, but also on the NPC side. Because I think this is going to be a single location. That means a limited number of characters, of NPCs. There's not going to be a lot of travel, so I'm going to have to put in a lot of work to overcome that. Do you see how by listing things that you like and things that you don't like, you're starting to already create a checklist of stuff that you need to add in? And you go, okay, cool. Now, we spoke about what type of GM you are at length. I have already done this many, many times. I know that I am a narrator GM. I'm not a modular GM. I'm not an author GM. I don't like to create these narratives for my players. So I am a narrator GM. Do I have any negative styles? Well, I'm not a winner. I don't try and win. I'm not a player. I'm not a GM. And maybe I am a bit of an actor GM, but I feel like if I combine the two together and then let the players run it, I'll be okay. So I should probably fill this in. You should do that now as well. Hopefully you found the answer to your GMing style. And if you are multiple, that's absolutely fine as well. I made a little note to myself here, the actor GM. I need less acting and more PC time. I need my PCs to be driving these stories more than my own stage performance. So it's just a little note to remind myself. Okay, we're looking now at self-help, which is constraints. What are the constraints of the real world? This is just to get you into the mindset of actual constraints. So here we go. You know what to do. We're going to answer 1 and 2 together. That's 4.1.1 and 4.1.2. Put those answers in. I think they're pretty self-explanatory. Do that now. All right, this next one is a bit tricky. Do something you've never done before. Climb a mountain, ride a roller coaster, go for a run on a beach, stalk an animal in the forest, but only take a photograph of it, please. Whatever is in your local area. It could very well be to try and run up a flight of stairs rather than just walk up a flight of stairs, if that's medically safe to do. Just do something different. I did something different a couple of weeks ago. I went for a mega hike, 20 kilometers, which is only like 14 miles or so, but for me it felt like a million. It was massive, not even 14, like 10 miles. Now that I said miles, it's like, well, you didn't walk very far. It took us several hours. It was through hilly country, up and down and across and around, and yet it was absolutely amazing right up until we got past the first kilometer mark. And then it was hell and slog, and no, I'm being facetious. So what did I learn from that experience? What was something different about that? Well, we walked through fields of wheat, and I did the whole gladiator thing where I sort of waved my hands through the bushels of wheat, and it was really cool, but it was also really quiet except for the bird song and that sort of thing. And there weren't other people. But when we did see other people, it was amazing how far away we could see them, and how sometimes you'd be looking at someone, you'd look away, what felt for a moment, and then you look back and they were suddenly so far ahead. I remember we were trying to actually catch up with one group just to see if we could get faster than they were, and they just disappeared. They really just vanished suddenly. So it was cool. It was fun. It was different. I've never done that kind of walk before, and the next day I knew all about it. But that's also part of the experience. Hit that pause button now. We need to build our own internal mind, and part of that is expanding our research and our understanding and our knowledge bases. So this next one is pretty straightforward. Go research something that you haven't researched before. Go look at something. How did the emperors of Japan, in this example, hold on to their seat of power for so long? It was very cunning. Very, very cunning, my lord. Go research anything from history. Look at what Roman sandals have to do with anything. Archaeologists hate Roman sandals. It costs lots of money when you find a Roman sandal. And there are lots of Roman sandals. Apparently they wore through them quite quickly, even though they could follow them on dirt roads. And look at all of this nonsense that's coming out of my head just because I know this, which means there could be an adventure in my game where the sandals are being fixed by the prisoners in the prison, and they hate them because they're so difficult to fix. That's interesting. I hope you saw what happened there. As I was just going through the stuff, I was looking at how can I apply it to my idea, and suddenly there it is. So go research something. Do that now. Taking the idea of what you've researched and maybe an idea for a campaign, or just taking what you know in the back of your head, just knowing it doesn't help us apply it. So now we're going to use our imagination and freeform association and all those wonderful things that I spoke about in all those videos so many weeks ago. We're going to use that in this little next exercise where we are putting together a dragon, the color purple, an orchid, and 3 small rocks. That's an interesting one. Link those together in a creative way. Don't just say that the dragon went to smell a purple orchid that was growing amongst 3 small rocks. That's the most succinct way of linking those things together, but is it the most interesting? I don't think so. You can do better. Now. Hopefully you've come up with your own narrative, and you actually get experience points for each narrative that you create. I've only created one, but you can create as many as you like. Now do remember to include your XP in this. As you can see, I've got 35 XP just on that page alone. As once you get to the very end of the workbook, if you've got enough XP, you will become a great GM. Now, the next section is fairly straightforward. What would happen if a giant banana appeared in the halls of the Goblin Warlord, killing 3 Goblin Warriors? 15 XP for the answer. So think about it, expand your horizons, and remember, there is always room for a giant banana. We just have to understand where it came from, where it's going, and why it was there in the first place. I had a lot of fun inventing my little warlord who created a big event out of the whole thing. And as I was just writing what would happen, I came up with the idea of the Yellow Hunt, an annual goblin hunt where the goblins go and hunt the biggest skinned animals possible so they can bring the skins back to repair the roof that was destroyed by the banana falling through it. You can do whatever you like as long as you are inspired. It's just about programming your mind to think a little bit differently. Now, let's think of a fantasy situation where we are trying to build a pontoon bridge. That's a bridge that's built over floating objects to create a temporary bridge. Think about it as a fantasy kind of situation, but draw on your inspiration of doing a speech in front of a class when you were in school, perhaps the smell of fresh coffee, and an undead attack. Go ahead and fill that in now. Whatever you chose to write, I kind of just put myself into that position quite literally and ended up having a small fireworks display which caused the entire project to be destroyed by undead. How you link things together is entirely on an individual basis. You can watch all those videos on how we come up with that kind of stuff. As long as you have done it, you get the experience points, and in this case, it was worth 75 XP. I hope that you remember to add that as we move forward. Right, we are on to the second aspect, which is almost caught up with where we are in the videos at the moment. The second aspect is creating our world space. So that's chapter 5, and it's time for us to start building out this world space. Now, by this stage, you should have some kind of idea as to what role-playing system you're going to want to use, as well as to the kind of setting or the genre that you are going to want to play in. This is something that we should be thinking about at this point, although we are now still gathering data to help inform us. So let's go ahead and fill in 5.1.1 as well as 5.1.2, which is where you have to ask your players what kind of game they'd like. Depending on how many players you have, obviously depends on how much experience points you get, but ask them what kind of game would they like to play in. And it doesn't really matter what they list, it's just useful for you to have in the back of your mind. One of my players listed romance, so they want to have some kind of romantic story going along. That does not mean gratuitous pornography and sex, and if you were thinking that is what it means, and I don't think you understand the definition of romance. So it could just be that there is an NPC relationship that is going to form. That's useful for me to know. I will throw that into my game. Add in your XP, total it up, and let's move on. So this is now the goals. What are the goals you want to achieve? Remember way back when, super early, right at the front of this whole process, you listed out some of your fears, that you didn't want to be boring and that you didn't want to be too constraining, the location to be too constraining. Now is the time when we are filling in our goals to go, well, how do I avoid being boring? Well, this is where we're going to start listing that. So this is how I'm going to start identifying that I have a goal of not being boring. And then what am I going to do about it? Do you notice that for each of the goals that I listed, I then wrote the challenges? How am I going to overcome these challenges? So I don't want to be boring. So I'm going to use different adventure types. I need to understand what those adventure types are. I'm going to use different locations, but I know that the location I'm thinking about is a single space. The prison is a single space. So how am I going to make it different? Again, I don't have to stress right now over the actual answers to those questions. I just need to be aware that those are there. And I need to have these goals so that I can come back later on and go, that's something that I was worried about. This is now how I can actually implement it and how I can make it different. We then move forward to expectations. What do we expect from the kind of ideas and from the role-playing system that we have decided to choose to actually use for our game. We need to list that. We need to list how we're going to subvert those, how we're going to entrench them, how we're going to alter them. Again, go look at old videos if you don't understand what I'm talking about. This video is about filling in this document. All right, so do that now. When you are looking to subvert these things or alter them or change them, you will have to tell your players what you are doing to a certain degree. Because in my case, where I've said that magic only works in certain locations, and that the gods only, there's only one particular god, the god of justice, that works in the situation that I'm thinking of, that information must be conveyed to the players so that they don't play a magic user expecting to be able to use magic all the time, only to discover that they actually can't. Same with the paladins and with clerics and things, because of the system I've chosen, which is Dungeons and Dragons. Look at the system, look at what your players are expecting, and remember, you have to tell them when you are changing things so that they know to expect those changes. Next, we need to choose our tone. This one is a favorite one of mine because it really gives you a lot of direction. Choose your tone now. I've chosen 4 tones, although I think some of them are very similar to one another, so they probably kind of just meld down into one. I've chosen gritty, survivalist, harsh, and dark, although the harsh and dark really could kind of combine together. I like to have more descriptive words. It helps me when I get stuck and I'm thinking, well, what could I do? If I think of harsh or if I think of dark, it might inspire me. So this is just enabling me, or enabling yourself, to be better at the game. Fill in your XP, of course, and move on. So there we are. Right, nearly done with this whole thing for now. In terms of the next section, work out how you will show the tone to the PCs. How are we going to show it in the location, in an NPC, and in an object? This is a useful exercise to do because you're going to have to do this throughout the entirety of the game that you are running. So if you get used to doing it now, it will become secondhand, super easy to do during the game. Please pause the video now. It really is a deep dive into concepts and ideas, things around the environment that you've chosen, as well as the objects, the people, and that sort of thing. I already, as I'm writing this, I'm like, this is going to be a very serious kind of campaign that I have got running in the back of my head. So what are the ramifications for that? What are the implications? Well, I need to tell my players this is going to be a very dark game. It's going to be a very tough game. If we move on, we then get to Chapter 7, which only was a couple weeks ago in terms of the videos. This is creating our world space. So we're going to actually create a world space here. We're going to fill in those little blocks, the reality of the world space. How do we travel? What's the starting size? Where do we play? And let's do that now. It's always interesting when you're trying to fill in this kind of stuff, because at the moment we're still sort of exploring this space. And as I was writing stuff in, it was prompting me. I was going, well, how do they travel? How do they get around, and that sort of thing? And that's where I came up with these various ideas. Let the creativity flow. Let it flow. Now, when it comes to the next section, which is to draw a map, this should not take you very long at all. It really shouldn't. Even a few seconds. Literally, just bang in whatever you need to just give yourself an idea. Now, due to the limitations of how I've set this video up, I will now cut away to me drawing the map. Right, it's not pretty to look at, but it did only take me about 20 minutes or 30 minutes to draw. I was using Photoshop. For those of you that are curious, you can literally use anything you like. I can see the mountain ranges that encircle this area. I can see the forests. I can see the swamps. I can see the river. I can see the waterfall. I can see where I've got my two locations. The big red dot in the middle island is probably the prison, and then the little red dot near the waterfall, and yes, that's a waterfall, is probably a small village that is going to be needed in order to service the prison. The pink barrier thing, I thought, well, the mountain range would be a nice barrier in its own right, and that the only way to get into this prison was down the waterfall, so prisoners would be brought in on the barges to the waterfall and then lowered in cages down into the little town, which would then transport them in those cages down to the actual prison itself. That's a pretty isolated space. You can't get through the mountain ranges, but at the same time, it's a case of going, well, I thought a barrier around the prison would be even more interesting. So not only is there a giant mountain range which you can't get through, but there is also this magical barrier that completely seals everyone in, except at the waterfall where the mages there can unlock the barrier and allow access through that for the prisoners to be lowered into. This is all just coming out of this idea of having a prison-like space. Now that I look at this map, though, I can go, well, I think what I should do is add just here and there, nothing major. But if I were to add in, let's say, a series of, I don't know, let's put them down here. Let's put down here a series of caves that maybe the players can hear or learn about, which might just lead under the barrier. That's something that could be quite interesting. What if we put another cave over there, so they've got a few options? This is assuming that they have to actually get out from this barrier. They've got to get out from the prison first, and they've got to get out from the barrier. I was putting the swamps in going, that could be some gritty, dark stuff. They have to go and mud mine. Perhaps it could be something like that, where they've got to go and work through the mud and pull out these root tubers that will feed the prison, and in the mud there are these awful little things that burrow into the skin and cause insanity, as well as other monsters and things. Going back to my tone, that's what I'm trying to include here, is this very dark sense of operations. If I were to present this map to my players, they'd look at it and go, yeah, okay. But it's enough for me to start working, and only once I am happy will I then take this map and actually use it elsewhere. So now we can include that map into our box here, or you can describe the map that you have created in this box, and that will get you 1,350 XP. That's pretty generous, actually. That's putting us on 1,450 XP. So this is now it, folks. This is where we have started to commit to our world space. And that's the hard part, in my opinion, over. Now it's just fun. So now we're going to go in and we're going to add in some species. We're going to add in some information. We're going to add in some life into this world space to make it start to come alive. Press the pause button now. In my case, it was very simple. There's no transportation very much because it's all confined within a prison. So I gave myself less experience points. Hopefully you filled in more and you will get more. That's just how it works, folks. I don't make the rules. Well, actually I do, but you get the point. Now we are going to explore our world. We become our own tourist. This is the whole point of these videos. We become a tourist. Let's go and explore and see what happens in this space. Hopefully you're already starting to get a sense of this space. I mean, this prison, I'm at the moment, my biggest fear is, I don't know if I want to actually play there. It's too difficult, or it seems like it might be. We'll have to continue exploring, and I may have to come back and revisit it. That's the whole process. So this is a tourist page. This is where you get to answer stuff, have fun, explore, and just let your mind wander free. Do that now. So I've started to flesh out this space, and I'm getting some pretty cool stuff. The food sounds awful. It tastes like dirt. It tastes like vinegar. It tastes sour. It's just not a nice place, especially if you're a sweet tooth. The cells sound awful. The common eating hall is even worse. The swamp is just nasty. So I've worked out some pretty cool stuff, I think. Hopefully you have as well. This lets us then start to wander around and ask the question, what does this world space promise? Why could we have adventures there? Does it fit with all of the tone and stuff? Hopefully it does. Fill in these answers and then you'll see what happens next. Do that now. You don't have to fill out the adventure in its entirety, just make notes for yourself. So my one adventure, surviving Narach Swamp. It's an awful place, it's full of awful things. They're going to have to survive out there with limited resources, limited tools. Gaining reputation in the prison, they're going to have to impress the orcish inmates. They're going to have to do this, they're going to have to do that to gain that position. Now, one of the things that happened by chance is that the eating hall you sit based on your reputation. The PCs, when they first arrive, won't have a seat at the table. They'll have to sit on the floor like some of the other degenerates and eat their food in their hand rather than a bowl. They haven't earned the right yet to claim that kind of stuff. As they progress throughout the prison, they'll progress along the table as well. It's a nice kind of way of representing their level progression, I think, as well as making it feel a lot more appropriate to the situation. Planning an escape. They're obviously going to want to plan an escape. That's definitely going to happen. So we've got to make sure that that is the main focus for almost the entirety of the campaign, perhaps. Then finally, they're going to have to work in the prison. They just got to go about daily life. I need to have an adventure or two that shows them what daily life is like. And then hunting things in the forest. Once they've got enough reputation, they could be allowed to go into that forest and start hunting actual meat and things. That could be a nice moment where they actually get to taste succulent, fresh meat and find berries that taste sweet in such contrast to the gritty, horrid food that they have been having already. So lots of adventure ideas. Is it still on target? Is it still on goal? I haven't yet seen the NPCs being more complex, which is still one of my major goals for this campaign. But at the same time, I think at the moment it's not yet boring. Part of me is going, I think the different areas of the prison need to be very different from one another. So they could be part of a prison that's actually a living thing. You get sent to Loki or to whatever, where you are then locked away in this prison that's actually a living monster that you're inside of. That could be something interesting and cool. We could also have other areas that are more magical or that were built by different races at different times, so they have different architecture. Plus, we've got all of the different swamps and the forests and things. So I think we're avoiding being boring at the moment. There's still quite a bit of work to be done, but I think we're there. Now, this next section pertains to you if you are wanting to use a pre-existing world space or if you are wanting to alter an existing world space. I probably should have mentioned that earlier, but I'm not, so I'm going to skip those two sections and then I'm going to move on to writing the primer for my players. This is what you should expect. And we know we've already got things like limited magic, limited divine magic, tough, gritty, limited equipment. This is a survival game. So that's what I'm going to be writing here. You write what you need to now. So there we go. I just needed to write down a few very small pieces of information. One thing I completely forgot was just to tell the players what kind of prison they were in. You can expand upon this more, but just basic notes. And hopefully the players would read this and go, it sounds harsh, but I do kind of want to escape from a prison. I really do. And basically, that brings us to the last sort of step that we need to look at in today's video, Chapter 8, which is bringing this world space to life. We need to understand foreground events and background events. And when you start to look at this, in the video, I said you don't plan out what foreground events you're going to use. You really don't. But do they help you now? Can they help you now to anticipate what foreground events you might have? Or, in this particular case, it's about you coming up with your own event situations and exploring those ideas so that you understand how events work so that later on during your game you can actually put them into practice. In my case, that event, I know what I'm going to do. I had some ideas as I was writing stuff. That magical barrier that surrounds the prison, once the players have escaped from the prison, they're going to find that that magical barrier is collapsing and that even worse monsters are sneaking in through that barrier and eating everybody. And so if the players don't figure out how to restore the barrier, they're going to get eaten by even worse monsters than the ones in the prison. I kind of like that irony, because you've escaped and now you've got to basically make sure that no one can get into the next layer of the prison. There is a certain twisted joy that I get from that. Although I'm fairly certain by the time the players have restored the barrier, they will actually be running the prison and will have reformed those within the prison. At least that's my hope anyway. Or it might just be a very dark ending and that they don't restore the barrier and then they get overrun by whatever it is on the outside of the barrier that's trying to get in. Either way, I think it's a fun twist, and so I know the barrier starting to break down is a foreground event that I'm going to use later on in the game. So making a note of it now might be useful. Make notes of foreground events and background events you might want to include in your own now. The very last section that we need to